Devilman, Devilman, Devilman. Rock and shine like I'm tattoo. Oh, Devilman, Devilman, Devilman.
There's a thought that's in the forefront of everyone's mind whenever they view any sort of media. That be the desire to take in an experience that not only will move us, but will stay with us. Whether or not that this is done through stellar visuals, a densely layered story, or an unforgettable setting, is dependent on those producing the media to choose how to display their work. It's rare for a story to tug at my heartstrings and present itself with an authentic tone, and doing so by utilizing great sound. Sound is a component that I would argue is not harped on enough and is massively undervalued. I have to commend Devilman Crybaby for using sound to great effect, and I love how it presents sound to its audience. The soundtrack, the performances, the beats, and the experimentation were all done well. A good quote that comes to mind from American sound director Gary Rydstrom reads, "It's long been said that you do a great job in sound when no one notices it." For this reason, I'd like to highlight a key figure in the production of Devilman Crybaby, being Kensuke Ushio. Ushio acted as the sound designer for Devilman Crybaby, and he staffed in one of my favorite shows being Ping Pong the Animation, which USA directed. And seeing them get together once again is utterly satisfying, because when USA is at the helm while Ushio is composing the sound, they're a killer duo that can't be beat. They're responsible for creating one of my favorite anime scenes of 2014, and that scene would be Peiko's match against Ryuji, which is one of the greatest displays of emotion communicated through the power of movement. The revelation that the love for your sport transcends pain and physical limitations is a beautiful thing. This revelation met with the warped and frenetic bursts of movement fused with like this high-pitched plucking synth had me absolutely glued to my screen. There are multiple other memorable moments like this throughout Ping Pong the Animation, like Smile and Peiko's match, the beginning of the local tournament, and Smile's iconic hero theme, which I hummed for a month straight. So when I learned that Ushio is composing the soundtrack for Devilman Crybaby, I expected it to be a goldmine. And going through the soundtrack was a joy because it contained plenty of pleasurable and consistent tracks with a couple of standout pieces. The pumping electronic leads and cheery dance tracks contrasted really well with almost childlike and whimsical pieces. These types of sounds are by no means special or out of the ordinary when it comes to anime, but these tracks are executed so well that they're really impossible to ignore. Some tracks that stood out were Devilman no Uta, with it being a modernized version of the original opening of the 1970s Devilman cartoon. Akira the Wild and Better Ryo are these house dance tunes that can't help but get you pumped and hyped by their upbeat sound. Miki is like this very solemn and what I would describe as a very humble and quaint tone, whereas Miki the Witch takes the original track and distorts it to a horrifying effect. There's also these very frightening and dreary sounds in tracks like Who Is She, Dreadful Stories, Nighthawk, Anxiety, Judgment, and Beautiful Celine, with the majority of the other sounds in the track listing being these really normal and lounging tracks like School Life, Sincerity, Wishy Washy, His Heart, and They Said. Now, Devilman Crybaby stands on its own two legs as being an independent and reimagined adaptation. And one of the more interesting changes that occurred in Crybaby would be how USA gave the side characters a refresh and brought them to the limelight. And I'm talking more specifically about the delinquents in Fudo's town. In an interview with USA, Haruna Yamazaki from BuzzFeed asks, "I see the delinquents have been modernized as rappers. You even have artists who are active in the hip-hop scene like Ken the 390 and Hanaya playing them." With USA responding with, "It wouldn't feel right if we had delinquents acting like they came straight out of the 70s. I feel like rappers are the people who speak what's on their minds today. Having professionals really gives it an impact, and it's really nice to see how they stand out in the street, passionately explaining what's happening." And it is true that the youth in Crybaby are expressed in a much different way than their manga counterpart. While the manga depicts them as being these one-note violent delinquents with warped and an almost devil-like demeanor, in Crybaby they're given more humanity and dimension. The group's rap scenes act as a sort of connective tissue that leads the viewer throughout the story, while the characters voice their concerns, thoughts, and dreams. The noteworthy thing about all of them is that all their performances have really great flow and beatboxing. Regardless of its foreign origin, it can be appreciated by American audiences. One rap scene that took everyone by surprise would be what I would call the butterfly scene. Here we're formally introduced to Cocoon, one of the delinquents in Wamu's group. He's held back by his status in the group and is given the name Cocoon by others. He wishes desperately that his real name will be heard and he'll gain acceptance by others, not only in his group but in the entire world. That his status and self-worth should not be undermined by the simple label of Cocoon, but his individual struggle and dreams will allow him to sprout wings and truly enable him to be a butterfly. Cocoon shows interest in Miko, a classmate to Akira and Miki. She's discontent with herself due to the fact that she lives in Miki's shadow. Her jealousy and discontentment permeates her behavior to such an extent where she's somewhat of a recluse. She and Miki share the same name, so whenever others are around, to avoid confusion, she's called Miko. And this inconvenience manifested itself in self-hatred and loathing, which Miko interprets as her not being as beautiful or as fast as Miki. This name Miko compared to Miki is seen as lesser, so she wants everyone to call her by her real name. And that brings us back to the butterfly scene, where both Cocoon and Miko are completely isolated. The background noises and background art shifts out of the way, and all the focus is strictly on Cocoon as he pours his heart out. And he proceeds to go on a full 1.5 minutes a cappella, and it works to a stunning effect. Having characters give large displays of emotion in order to connect to the audience is commonplace, but it's a real rarity that you can actually gain a connection and investment in a character after one of these large displays of emotion. And this is the first time in a long time that I've really gotten invested through song, and I was completely sold. American influence in anime, or more specifically black culture in anime, is really sparse, and whenever it does appear, it's embraced in open arms or it's either lost in the ether that is my anime list. So whether there's a particular show that is catered to a specific audience such as Samurai Champloo or something as niche as Tokyo Tribe, it's always fun to see American influence on foreign media, especially if it's from a smaller subculture in the larger whole. There's more of an international feel to this adaptation of Devilman compared to the other various adaptations. And while I would say that including rappers in a tense story might be a brazen choice, it was really interesting and it was really done properly, if anything. There are a multitude of series out there that try to grasp at the complexities of the human condition, our sins, animalism, and faults, but this series really manages to capture in such a flagrant and invigorative way that it will keep you transfixed to the screen and keep you fully engaged. Devilman Crybaby makes an excellent use of its soundtrack performances and molds them together to tell a beautiful story that not only is refreshing to watch, but absolutely beautiful to listen to. Momentai.